Hello, I'm James Henry, and it's Tuesday, so I'm sharing a thought with you. This morning, as I was sitting in my chair, I had several thoughts about a word that's familiar and yet so deep and wide that it's hard to get a hold of, and that word is grace. And speaking of grace, I want to give you some by sharing the words that I think are very important. You, whoever you are, wherever you are, listening to me, and even everyone who isn't listening in this moment, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. And that is just true in this universe. Everything and everyone. So I was having some thoughts this morning as I was sitting in my chair about grace. I've been thinking about it for the last week, but it kind of came to me. This is not exhaustive, but this is the way that I thought of it this morning. Is grace is space enough to be yourself, mistakes, failures, and all. That is, to me, a very simple. You could say that's not an adequate, but that's, for me, in this moment, that's what it is. I am convinced that the divine gives us space to be, not in spite of, but including our mistakes and failures. Space to be. But you know what? Despite the fact that the divine models a giving us space to be, we are pretty quick not to give space. And so it seemed like to me that was a good thing to talk about today. I'm convinced that the primary person we are least able to give space to is ourselves. When we make mistakes, when we fail, we do not give ourselves the space to have made those mistakes, those failures, those errors in judgment. And rather, we beat ourselves up. And you know what happens when we don't give ourselves space? We are very resistant to giving anybody else space either. I think the lack of grace for one another in our world, the lack of space, begins with me. It begins with me, with my propensity to judge somebody else because I'm already judging myself. And by not giving myself space, that's just a wonderful model. And I put wonderful in quotation marks. It's a wonderful model of how I'm not going to give anybody else space. And sometimes I'm not even aware I'm not giving myself space. So I put my stuff on someone else. Grace allows for the flow and freedom to recognize that we are all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fail. We're all going to have errors in judgment, or sometimes even intentional plans in judgment that turned out to be not good. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that you ought to just give yourself space to continue to make the same mistake over and over and over again and just say, oh, that's okay, I'm going to keep making it, particularly if it's harmful to other people. I'm not suggesting that at all. Paul has something to say about that in his letter to the Romans. Should I sin so that grace could abound? No way. Paraphrasing Paul. But I think that you and we should give ourselves space. I've made mistakes. Heck, I've already made some today. Allowed myself to get distracted by some things that kept me from getting at the things that needed getting at. But I'm going to give myself some space for that and try to improve and get better. Because if I dwell on that, then I'm there this morning in the chair where I was distracted by social media and other kinds of things and frustrated and let myself wander all over the place. If I get stuck there, then that's where I am. I'm not here where I'm meant to be. So I'm going to give myself space for those. Yesterday morning, I wasn't distracted. Today, I was. Who knows what tomorrow will hold? I certainly don't. So moment by moment, giving ourselves space to be in the midst of mistakes and errors that we make and that others make as well. And trying to see through divine eyes this beautiful world that God loves, and loving it too. And that world includes you. It includes me too. So are you giving yourself space? I want you to ask yourself, take a moment. Are you giving yourself space for the mistakes, for the errors, for the failures in your life, the ones you've made today? Are you still dwelling on some of them from earlier in your life? Are you finding yourself caught by those things? Because that's not grace. That's not giving yourself space. God does. The divine does. There is divine space for you in the midst of all of that. God made you to be you and gives you space to be you and to discover who you is. And some of that discovery is making mistakes, failing, errors in judgment, doing mean things. Hopefully you discover that's not who you are, but you did them. So give yourself some space, not to keep doing them with abandon, but to recognize that your failures are your failures and your mistakes are your mistakes. And that being human and limited, finite as we are, we're going to. And it's just part of being alive. So instead of beating yourself up and then channeling that onto other people as well and beating them up too, whether it's in your mind or in your words or literally, maybe make a little space, because making a little space is allowing grace to flow. That's my thought for today. That's what I've been thinking about, trying to give myself more space and especially trying to give other people more space in my life. I hope you'll give it a try as well. I certainly welcome your thoughts and reflections if you want to in any of our spaces where you can actually write, which is obviously our Facebook page and our YouTube, where our YouTube channel is. Now, we're working on eventually having that possibility of response on the front of the website as well. But until then, feel free to respond and share your own thoughts about what grace is. You can always reach out to me too if you want to talk about grace, if you think I've oversimplified it or whatever. I'm always interested in that kind of a conversation. But try this one on for size, giving yourself space and everyone else too to be just who they are. Because remember, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. No one can take that away from you. That's who you are.